I do think there's this tendency when you're looking at something from the outside and it's totally horrific. It's natural to say to yourself, I would never let that happen here. That would never happen here. I would stand my ground. I would do whatever it takes to fight against what's happening. But the reality is that if government officials came to Chickenlandia, if they brought with them police and they told me that they were going to destroy my flock, that is a situation in which I would have very little power. And it makes me feel powerless just to think about it. And I gotta say, I think that's the point. Hello friends, welcome to Chickenlandia. My name is Dahlia. I'm a backyard chicken educator, also known as the president of Chickenlandia. Raising chickens has been the best way for me to find peace and joy in my life, and I want to help you find that too. Monkey, I'm going to go ahead and put you down, honey, because this video is serious. Yep, it is. So before I even get started, the first thing I want to say is that obviously I want what's best for the public and I really care about public health. I'm not going to stand here and tell you not to follow government regulations. That is not my style. I'd like to keep my channel, thank you very much. And I encourage you to do your own research so that you can come up with your own conclusions. What I'm going to be telling you today are my thoughts on this, what I think is a very important issue. So today I'm going to be talking about a real tragedy that happened on an ostrich farm up in British Columbia in Canada. And I do want to mention that I think for some of you, you might hear my opinion on this and make some assumptions about where I stand politically. And that's because this issue has been politicized. There are certain figures where, their opinions and their voices have been really amplified regarding this issue. And because of that, it's kind of turned into this culture war. And I really feel like that's by design. I've talked about this before on my channel. I think they want us to be embroiled in these culture wars. So we're not thinking about the legitimate concerns that everyone across the political spectrum should have about what just happened. I would just encourage you, no matter where you are politically, to listen to what I have to say. Like I said at the beginning, do your own research, develop your own ideas about this, because this might have to do with ostriches, and maybe you think, it's just ostriches, but this really is significant historically, and I think it's important for all of us to really look at it and ask ourselves how this situation and how it was handled is going to affect us and certainly affect future generations. In Edgewood, BC, there was, I'm not really sure how to say this. I'm going to talk about it in the past tense because there's no more ostriches there. But there was an ostrich farm and it was called Universal Ostrich Farms. Originally, it was a commercial farm, but in recent years, they switched to a non-commercial farm where they focused on breeding, on tourism, and actually scientific research with an emphasis on the immune systems of ostriches, which are generally very resilient animals. The ostriches that once lived on this farm, in my opinion, it seemed like they had a really idyllic life. They had a lot of acres to roam. It was an open air farm, so they could see the sky. They could run on the ground. They could feel their feet on the earth. And there was also a natural pond on the farm. And sometimes wild birds would visit that pond, of course. In my opinion, this is absolutely a great scenario for domestic ostriches. That's how I would like to see any poultry or ostriches, emus, any birds that we're keeping domestically. This is the kind of life that I would like to see them living, because I think it's very close to the kind of life they would have in the wild, which is the life that they're supposed to have. Ostriches can live a long time, definitely longer than chickens. There were some ostriches on this farm that had been there for 30 years. That's an amazing thing, to be living with an animal and to get to know that animal for so long. But unfortunately, all that changed in December of 2024. On December 10th of 2024, one of the ostriches fell ill with a respiratory illness. And although that ostrich recovered, unfortunately, that illness started to move through the flock. By the time it was over, the farm did lose about 15% of their birds. So that is 69 birds out of the 468 ostriches that they had at the time. And this all happened over 36 days. So obviously this is a horrible scenario. Nobody wants to deal with something like this. Just to lose so many birds like that, I'm sure it was very traumatic. But after that period of 36 days, according to the farm, they did not have any more illness in the flock. So what I imagine happened is that there were some birds that got sick and fully recovered, and then there were also some birds that didn't ever show any symptoms, and they never did. So to me, that's not surprising. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of illness. But what happened at that point is an anonymous person called a government agency called the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, or CFIA, and they made an anonymous report that this situation had happened on this farm. So at that point, the CFIA intervened and they confirmed the presence of highly pathogenic avian influenza via PCR test. And they issued a notice to dispose to the farm. And what that means is that the farm got an order to kill their remaining flock and dispose of them. So obviously this whole situation started to pick up some traction. The CFIA made a statement about it, and they cited animal health and economic interest, including the need to protect both public and animal health to minimize impacts on Canada's $6.8 billion domestic poultry industry and $1.75 billion in annual poultry exports. So I did think that the emphasis on the economic impact was very interesting, especially upon learning the rest of the story. I do feel like I should say this on the website for the farm. It does say that the PCR tests were conducted on 2 ostriches that had been dead for over 24 hours. And the farm did request to conduct their own independent testing, and they were told by the agency that they could not do that, and also that they could not treat any remaining birds that fell ill under threat of a fine of $200,000 and 6 months in jail. I can't verify that the CFIA agrees with that account. I'm telling you what was on the farm website. I didn't have time to dive really deep into it, so I'm just letting you know what the Universal Ostrich Farms website says in an effort to kind of make this a little bit more balanced. So there was a lot that happened between when the farm got the notice to destroy the rest of their flock until November of 2025. I'm not going to do a whole play-by-play now because it would make this video very long, but I do encourage you to go and read about it and try and get a balanced view on what happened, because I think it's really important to see all the steps that were taken. You know, the farm really fought to save their animals, and they had a lawyer that was helping them. They had a lot of support all over the world, and at times they felt a lot of hope, and then of course those hopes were dashed. In the end, they lost their battle to save their birds. Okay, so I just want to tell you, I'm going to describe what happened, and it can be triggering, so I'm just giving you a little bit of warning right now. You know, if you have little kids watching this video, you might want to tell them to go do something else for a little bit. On November 6th, 2025, after nightfall, the CFIA, who had corralled the birds into a confined area, they made a pen out of hay bales. They did destroy the remaining ostriches. And they did this by employing who they said was a trained marksman. And that person went in and shot these birds one by one. This is the supposed humane way in which they killed these birds. Oh, and it was under the supervision of a veterinarian, which I guess they feel somehow makes it better. I don't know what the veterinarian was doing. Maybe they were taking temperatures. I don't know, you know, what, how that makes the situation better. I really don't. Because any veterinarian that would sit there and watch that and participate in that, I don't think they have animal health at the forefront of their mind. Anyone who knows anything about animals, or birds, or humans for that matter, knows that what the Canadian government did that day was not in any way humane. Those ostriches were surely terrified. It's gunshots. They were running. They were scared. That is the nature of such a scenario. So I don't understand. It's actually ludicrous to me that they would make that claim that, oh, we're doing this humanely and this is how they decided to do it. It's beyond my comprehension that they would think the public would be okay with this. At best, the horrific way that they culled these animals was because they just are grossly incompetent when it comes to these matters. And I really hope that's the case, because that's the best case scenario. Because at worst, you could also look at it as a method of intimidation. I really hope I'm wrong about that, and I know a lot of you are out there thinking, oh my gosh, she's nuts, but I have seen enough of what governments can do. I have seen what they can do for people. I have seen what the Canadian government has justified in this world repeatedly, especially in the last 2 years. So, nothing is beyond what I think they're capable of. Unfortunately, I have a very negative view on not just the Canadian government, but governments across the world. So that's the lens from which I am looking at this through. So, like I said before, I want what is best for public health. I want people to be healthy. I don't want bird flu to go through the population. I don't want there to be a pandemic. That is not what I want. But even if you are coming from a health standpoint, I don't understand why after almost a year of these ostriches being well and not showing symptoms, that they wouldn't use this opportunity to study the immunity of these animals, to breed more resilient animals, and to also not create such a situation of distrust among the public towards the government. I mean, this is really bad. Public health is not about just what's immediately in front of us. It's about how things will affect us long term. If we never allow immunity to develop, then what are the long-term effects of that? In my opinion, this could have actually been really good for public health and even for the poultry industry. But we missed this opportunity to learn more about this disease and to learn more about how to fight it. If they really think that destroying entire populations of domestic birds is the answer and handling their disposal in a completely incompetent way, then I'd like to know what their end game is. The ostriches lived in an open-air farm. They lived in nature. They lived the way ostriches are supposed to live. Yes, there was a pond on the farm, and yes, they were exposed to wild birds. But I'd like to ask them, if this is what we have to prevent, then how do you suppose ostriches should live? Domestic ostriches, how should they live? How should backyard chickens live? Should they live in total confinement, completely separate from the natural world that they're supposed to be in? I believe there's a word for that. It's called a factory farm. So is that the direction you want us to go in? Because it really seems that way. I know that there's a real concern about highly pathogenic avian influenza making the jump from birds to human beings. And we've seen a lot of strange jumps happen in the last few years where, cows had it and cats had it and pigeons had it. And obviously, I don't want people to get it. But, the scenarios in which we are in the most danger of that jump happening, it's overwhelmingly not in an open air farm. It's overwhelmingly not with backyard chickens that are living the life they're supposed to live. It's in factory farms. It's in situations where it is overcrowded, they are confined, it's an unhealthy environment, it's an unnatural environment. So why aren't we focusing on that? In my very humble opinion, the reason that they don't focus on factory farms or changing the factory farm conditions is because the priority isn't public health. It's the bottom line for the poultry industry. And also, it's possibly about making sure that we know that we have to stay compliant, because if we don't, really awful things could happen. I say a lot that, when I look out into my flock, I see humanity reflected back at me. And in this scenario, it's really easy to focus on the worst of humanity because it was just an awful reflection of that. But I do want to give you a glimmer of hope because this scenario also showed me how people of all walks of life can come together and really stand up for something that they believe in. I do think that people are moving away from these culture divides that keep us from seeing the truth. And generally, I think that people believe what their eyes and ears are telling them. And when you look at this scenario, even after knowing everything about it, it doesn't look good. It seems wrong. I think most people would look at it and say, there has to be another way. My advice in Chickenlandia when it comes to keeping chickens healthy has always been to focus on building their resilience from the inside out. Because in nature, chickens are going to be exposed to all kinds of things. And to believe that we can really create this controlled environment and that we can stamp out these diseases by killing off huge populations of animals, I think that is really obscene hubris. Because as human beings, we are part of nature. We cannot control nature. It will never happen. It really won't. I think there's some people that think that it can, but nature has showed us time and time again that that is not the case. I know that this was a very heavy video, and it's really hard to think about this stuff. I would encourage all of you to go outside and spend lots of time with your chickens, watch them pecking and scratching the earth, watch them underneath the wide open sky, but just hold them close and spend a lot of time with them. And I think that'll make you feel better, and it will help you to remember that nature is always with us, no matter what. So you might have an opinion. I want to hear your opinion. Just be nice about it. You can put it in the comments. I do read all of the comments. Make sure it's respectful. But the main thing I want you to know is that no matter what, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, no matter what walk of life you're from, you are always welcome in Chickenlandia. Bye.